Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. So right off the bat, I just want to say that I am traveling right now, so if I sound funny or if this video has even less polish than my normal videos, which is hard to do, that is the reason why. It also may be a bit of a shorter video. But what I want to talk about today is how to use liberals to your advantage. So originally I wanted to do a video about why I dislike liberalism and why I think it is completely false and how it is the source of so many of our problems. But then I started thinking about how all of that connects to the virtue of fortitude, and then a whole lot of other things came into my mind. So I'm going to connect all of those things together and give you a bit of a preview of each of those. So I get a lot of people in my comments saying, I knew something was wrong with X, Y, and Z. I just couldn't place my finger on it. I couldn't understand exactly what was wrong with it. Well, I want to go over today the exact reason, the principled reason why so many of these things sound funny to you, sound wrong to you, but you might not be able to place why. And it's because of a liberal ideal. Now, as I always say, if you want to take liberalism in its original form, like hundreds of years ago when it first began, that is to liberate us from error, that I can get behind. Why? Because to liberate yourself from error is also to say, I subject myself to the truth. But it quickly fell into the idea of liberating yourself from everything and anything. And I say that every once in a while. But what does that actually mean? What does that actually look like? Well, as you may know, if you listen to my channel, I've been going through a lot of psychological stuff and a lot of, we'll say, societal stuff with the connection of human beings one to another, and going through the scientific and psychological reasons for that and putting it in the background of a lot of my videos. And in watching a lot of this information and going through a lot of these papers and hearing professors talk, I can always place my finger on when someone is going off the rails. And again, this is very useful information to always remember when speaking to someone. If you feel something is off, you need to logically trace it back to the principle of what is wrong. And the principle of what is wrong for most of these people, especially the ones talking psychology, is that they believe that the normal, healthy, original state of you as a human being is to be completely free. And I'm here to tell you that's a load of horse dung. You can never, ever be completely free. Not in this world anyway. Now, they usually express it as, if you're not completely free, then someone is oppressing you, someone is abusing you, or you're not living up to your full potential, or you're getting this, that, or the other thing wrong. Usually it's someone else's fault. Sometimes it's you've internalized these problems, but it's always, you see, you're not completely free, therefore something is wrong. No, something is not wrong. That's human existence. And of course, they get this absurd notion from liberalism, but not just liberalism. There's many ancient ideas which are the precursor to it. It's always been around. It's basically, if you want to go back to, let's say, 2,000 to 1,500 years ago, it's a combination, I think, really of Gnosticism and Arianism. But anyway, and it's really absurd to listen to people who are spouting off science and then in the background seeing that their original principle that they are proceeding from is that people should be in their normal state completely free. Because science contradicts that exact thing. Because the reason why science exists to begin with is because we looked at the universe and said, there are rules to this universe. Let's find out what they are. And the thing is that once you find out those rules, you can manipulate things around it. But the point is that, yeah, the rules of the universe exist and science can work as a normal routine of this happens X after Y after Z because we're subject to those rules. Everything in this universe is subject to those rules. Now, you might be one of those people who say, well, there's miracles. They're not really subject to the rules. Okay, if those things exist, they're the exception to the rule that proves the rule, which means normally everybody is subject to those rules. And if you're subject to those rules, you can never be completely free. And therefore, any idea which originates as its principle that you can be completely free has problems with it and is mistaken in some way or other and going to lead you to conclusions that don't actually exist or can't actually come into existence in this world. Further to that, we're all people who have bodies, and those bodies have limitations. Despite, again, the Gnostic heresy, which has come all the way forward to the 2000s, I'm sorry, you have a body. You're subject to what that body can do and what it does to you. Again, subject to. You're never completely free. Oh, by the way, this is the reason why, of course, you see these far left, quote unquote, progressives going on about, yes, you can choose your gender or whatever else that they think that you can change about yourself, because their origin point is you can be completely free, when that's a load of horse dung. And let's go back to the science one for a second. That's why they also, in that section of quote unquote progressivism, especially in the stuff that I deal with entertainment, keep on talking about magic. Why? Because magic is this absurd idea that you can, by force of your will, exempt yourself from the rules of reality. And further to all of that, the one thing that I go on about a lot is the fact that these people always live in these Western liberal democracies where they think they have rights without acknowledging the fact that if you have a right, it always comes along with a corresponding responsibility. If you want to figure out whether a right is an actual right or not, see if it has an attached responsibility. If it doesn't, it's not really a right. Even the most basic of these, let's say you have the right to live. Okay, what does that right grant you? Where's the responsibility, the very basic responsibility that comes along with that? Your basic responsibility is that if you have a right to live, you have a responsibility not to kill other people. And this is why your quote-unquote progressive people are always talking about privilege. Why? Because they want privilege. That's what they want. They don't want to eradicate privilege. They want privilege, which is another way of saying they want rights without responsibilities. That's privilege. But if you want to live in a place that acknowledges that rights exist and have them work correctly according to the system of reality, guess what? You're acknowledging you're subject to a whole lot of different things. The responsibility that comes along with those rights and how those tie in with actual reality around you, especially when you're talking about natural law and its connection to rights that are unalienable, such as you would see within America. So yeah, good trick. If you look at something or listen to something and say to yourself, something's not right here, I don't know what it is, try and trace it back to the principle of the thing and say, is this person's original mindset the idea that people can be completely and utterly free? If it is, then that's the problem. Usually they try to caveat by saying, we're only free insofar as we subject ourselves to the things that we will ourselves to be subject to and nothing else. I'm sorry, that's just one step removed. It's the exact same thing. Now, how does this connect to the virtue of fortitude? Well, it connects to the virtue of fortitude because, in part, that's what fortitude is. It's the realization that you have to give up something of yourself in order to serve something greater. And that's what happens when you acknowledge that you are subject to something greater than yourself. You're acknowledging that you have to give up some of you in order to serve the greater thing. Sometimes that, in an extreme case, might be your life. In the middle case, it might be some of your health. In the small case, it might be your ego or your pride. Just to put it a different way, fortitude is an acknowledgement that if I do this thing, I know it's going to hurt. It might hurt my pride. It might hurt my health, so much so that it takes away some of my life, let's say at the end of my life, or it might take away my life entirely, depending on what kind of situation that you're in. But it's going to take something away from me, and I'm going to do it anyways. That's fortitude. And that's why it's contrary to your quote-unquote liberal, progressive mindset, because the idea of the entire liberal mindset is, again, I am completely free. I subject myself to nothing else except what maybe I may will myself to accept as being subject to, which in the end means that there's no greater good than me. It is the selfishness that I always say that Plato talks about in the Laws, where he says, this is the greatest evil, which again continues on through Christianity as pride is the mother of all sin. The greatest thing in the liberal mind is I, is me, is your ego, is your pride, is I can be completely free, is given the right circumstances, I can exempt myself from any and every responsibility, any and every rule, even of the universe, which is complete and utter nonsense. Now, if you think liberalism is something else and has a different origin point, put it in the comments. Let me hear your take on that. Now, here's the thing. We'll get into why and how you should be using liberals. Do I think that we should get rid of liberalism entirely? Well, no. Why? Because there's a very interesting theory which I ascribe to, and it is the theory that Western civilization, but not just Western civilization, but European Western civilization is the dominant culture, especially right now, English speaking and American of the English speaking. So American, English speaking, European civilization is so dominant because it puts up with liberalism. And just as a sidebar here, I said it the first, I'm traveling. Yeah, I've been traveling for over a week and I will be for almost another week. I am the furthest away from America I have ever been in my life, and I am shocked at how anglicized everything is everywhere. Sure, I know the place I am right now is a touristy area, but everyone here that I deal with knows at least some English. And this is not an area where anybody even remotely speaks English. I went to the grocery store because I needed an actual chocolate bar, not the frou-frou chocolate things that they have all over the place, but an actual, Snickers, Mars bar, something. I needed. And I walked in and there they were. I took a walk around the store and saw crazy things like the fact that in the cereal aisle, they were these rip-off cereals of American cereals. It was bizarre. But again, they're all tracing their origin back to anglicized society. So yeah, I know this is just my personal travel experience, and I know that if I go out even slightly from the city, if you go out into the country, which I've been out into the country around here, you're not going to find anything in English, whereas in the city, signs are almost always have some English on them. I understand. People out in the country are not going to be anglicized in that kind of way. But that doesn't change the fact that the major centers are anglicized. I would say, yes, not just Western society, but European Western society, particularly anglicized European Western society, particularly American in its flavor, is still dominant. And not only that, but we live now really at the pinnacle of our society, at the very least in things like scientific knowledge and all that kind of stuff. But the question is why? Well, the question is answered by the fact that we put up with things like liberalism. Now, what do I mean by that? Again, I mean that anglicized European Western civilization is not the smartest civilization in the world. We're not the smartest people in the world. That's a given fact. But what makes it dominant is not our ability to be smart, but our ability to innovate. And I could trace it all the way back to the basic European idea of bringing in ideas from other parts of the world to make them European, like our numbering system, like our alphabet, which is a combination of a whole bunch of different alphabets encountering each other, like the English language, which is, yes, it has its own origin, but it's a hodgepodge of so many different things just thrown together. But that kind of European mentality led to a more refined European mentality, specifically in the anglicized sphere, which allows us to innovate. And that innovation comes from the fact that we have these kooky thinking people that we allow to exist beside us. Now, they should not be allowed to be the dominant part of our civilization, but we need to allow them to exist, and maybe even to the point of, yes, they may gain control of our civilization every once in a while. But in putting up with them, we actually become more and more innovative because their kooky, off-the-wall ideas allow us to think in different directions. Again, they shouldn't be allowed to run free. That's really the point of the entire thing that I started this with. As in, there are rules, you are subject to the rules. We need to allow for this thing that allows for innovation, but subjected to rules. It's kind of like, well, I'm always going on about comic culture. It's like what I would say is the pinnacle of comic culture, which would be the 1980s. You had a lot of these writers and artists, and yes, I admit, they're flaming liberals. But the point was, they produced some of the best stories that not just they, but anybody could produce. But they did it because they had such constraints on them. They weren't allowed to take their quote-unquote progressivism and just fling it out there onto the page. No, they were subject to the company that owned Marvel at the time and their insistence that they make money. They were subject to their editors, especially at the time, someone like Jim Shooter. They literally made Marvel great by clamping down on the hippy-dippy society that it started from and saying, okay, you're going to follow the rules. These are the rules of editing. You're going to follow the rules. And on top of that, whether you like it or hate it, was the comic code. So all of these specific limitations allowed these free-thinking liberals to work within the rules in order to tell great stories. And the thing is that the reason I started thinking about this entire thing about using liberalism, using liberals, is because a lot of people are very black-pilled about the future of Western civilization, saying this is the end, saying I can't believe the nonsense that we see around us. Everything is just going to go downhill from here. And I would say, no, we have the upper hand now. And once the culture starts to shift backwards, there's going to be a renaissance of really good innovation and ideas. Why? Because we're taking the liberals who have for the last 60 years minimum tried to run our civilization into the ground because they had control over it. We're going to subject them one more time to the rules and get innovation out of it, get great things out of it. So just to be clear, I'm not saying use other people in the fact that you deny their dignity. No, everybody should have basic dignity. But yeah, use liberals. Use them for innovation. Use them always subject to the rules, understanding, letting them know that they are subject to the rules, possibly even with a heavy hand. Again, looking back at Jim Shooter and his reign in Marvel, he had a heavy hand. But yes, we need to understand that there is a renaissance coming of good culture. Why? Because we will begin again to use the liberals around us. Not allow them to have free reign, but to use them. Because they are, like it or not, one of the sources of how we are allowed to innovate in such a way that American, anglicized, European, Western civilization has become so dominant. And, like it or not, despite what the black pillars are going to tell you, I see absolutely no end of that, at the very least, in the near future. So, if I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about all this. All right, I'll leave it there. I'll see y'all later. Bye.